who was an awful person when they were alive, but everybody treats them like a saint because they are dead. Coco Chanel was an artsy and anti-Semite. I think it's such poetic justice that the brand is owned by a Jewish family, the Wertheimers. When she started her perfume line in the 20X, she got funding from this family. She tried to take ownership of the perfumes from them using Nazi laws, but they had already handed their businesses over to Gentile friends, so she wasn't able to. After she died, the Wertheimers bought a controlling interest in the fashion line, and it's still owned by their family, so the same people she tried to squeeze out of one part of her business using Nazi laws own the whole thing. Bit of a UK and India specific one, but Jade Goody. She was famous for nothing other than being thick and racist. Then she died and everyone acted like she was a saint because it led to more people getting tested for cervical cancer. She is the first person I thought of when I saw the question. Public opinion on her flipped so fast when she got cancer. I will say this, the way the press treated her after the news came out, in most cases, would make people scoff. But it did raise awareness. She also did redeem herself somewhat. All that money she got with the amount of press coverage was going towards her children and nobody can really fault her for that. Charlie Chaplin is remembered pretty fondly, but he repeatedly sexually assaulted teenage girls he worked with, even impregnating one. If I recall correctly, the ages of known girls he assaulted was from about 12 to 16, and he was known to publicly talk about how much he liked young girls. Bob fucking Marley, poet and a prophet, and gigantic asshole. Very violent toward his wife, sexually assaulted her, possibly the conception of one of his children, cheated like fuck, totally absent and unloving to his kids, moody and petty, immensely talented, along with the rest of the Wailers, and their producers, and brilliant music, but massive douchebag with posters, shirts and murals all over the place. Caroline Flack. The media was so mean to her, and she committed suicide. So sad. She also dated a 16-year-old when she was in her 30s, and beat one of her boyfriends with a lamp. Louis Burton was the one she was charged with beating with a lamp while he was asleep, but a previous ex-boyfriend also claimed she was physically abusive to him as well. I don't believe the media would have been so kind to a man who tried to kill his sleeping fiancée and had a history of shitty behavior. My uncle. To give you an idea of the kind of man he was, he once profited off his friend's son dying. The guy was studying in England when he suddenly died. The father wanted to fly him back to his home country for the funeral. My uncle offered to make the arrangements for him. He looked up the price of the flights and gave the father that number. After he was given the money, he turned around and booked the cheapest possible flights for the body, taking several days longer than it should have, and passing through a few random countries. He pocketed the excess cash. Now that he's dead, it's all he was such a good businessman that helped so many people, completely ignoring the fact that he only helped people when it benefited him, and for the most part he was a colossal piece of shit that even screwed his own family in the name of making a buck. Karma bit him in the ass for that one, though, because soon after he was diagnosed with cancer and never got to enjoy that money before he died. Even his own kids hated him. I feel like the Edison pendulum has swung too far. Yes, in elementary school he was praised too much, but now it's like most people think he was nothing but a scam artist. And at the same time, Tesla, who was never given enough credit in elementary school, is now held up like how Edison was. In reality, they were both great inventors. Yeah, Edison did some shitty business tactics, but it doesn't take away from his inventions. And yes, Tesla was right on AC power, but no, his plan for free wireless electricity was not held back by corporate greed. It was quacky pseudoscience. Elvis Presley. Elvis was a wonderful and game-changing singer, but as a person he was a creepy weird piece of shit. He liked girls who were uncomfortably young, constantly cheated on his wife, chased his live-in girlfriend around the house with a gun in a drugged-out state, refused to touch his wife after the birth of their daughter, then raped her when she complained about it. This is just some of the shitty and weird things he did. Elvis is not a hero and definitely shouldn't be remembered as one. Gandhi. He barred his wife from taking Western medication, penicillin. When she fell ill she died, and when he was sick later, he took the medication. Ferdinand Marcos, the former president of the Philippines who's responsible for so much corruption, chaos, and the country's overwhelming debt. The country was under martial law and would arrest dissidents and torture them. While a lot of Filipinos hate him, there's a surprising number of people that think that all the shit he did is justified because he established a fucking railway system, some government agencies, and other random shit, all while amassing a huge debt. John Lennon. He should definitely be remembered as a good musician, but as a person in general he was pretty awful. Steve Jobs' legacy hasn't changed much since he was alive. He was always known as an asshole, and was even ousted from Apple back in the 80s. Back in the early 6th grade me did a book report on Steve Wozniak. It was well known even then what Jobs was really like. The thing is, Steve Jobs is also a genius. Weird as fuck, and an asshole, but a business genius. He didn't design products, but he did know what people would buy, and he was very good at the business side of it. There is a reason why pretty much everything he pushed out of Apple turned to gold, and you can track when he was with the company by how well he company was / is doing, and how their products are received. I don't think his legacy has changed much since he died. At least not by people who know a little bit about the industry. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the people the Conjuring films are based off of. Eye roll. People they worked with have admitted they were instructed to make false claims of paranormal situations and to embellish their stories. The Warrens were pretty much scam artists who made a shit ton of money from false stories and fake witness accounts. There is tons of evidence of this. But after their death, and with their movies, they are labeled as misunderstood and judged for their unorthodox line of work. Gandhi. Racist, anti-Semitic, pedophile, wife beater, sent his niece out to get him a pumice stone for his feet, forcing her to walk through an area known for women being raped and murdered, and told her after that he would have been proud and happy had she been raped. He was a piece of shit, not some peaceful dude everyone should idolize. Didn't Joe Paterno knowingly turn a blind eye to credible accusations of child molestation by Jerry Sandusky? I remember that he said that he would have done things differently, or something to that effect. All of the Penn State grads I know still hold this guy up as a saint because of his success in football. Fuck that guy. Henry Ford. Don't know how well known this is, but he was a huge anti-Semite. He supported the Nazis and funded the publication of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was a funny set of documents that supposedly transcribed meetings of rich Jews plotting the demise of Western civilization. The book became a go-to anti-Semitic text during the 1920s and 30s as a result. Maradona. There are videos of him beating his wife and he shooted at journalists. There is a video of him, during a football match, assaulting a player with the clear intent to do as much damage as possible. He is famous, here in Italy, for being a massive tax evasion. He was so proud of it that he laughed about it during an interview with a journalist, Fazio, and now he is treated as a saint when, in reality, he was just a piece of shit. I know this is mainly in my country because propaganda, but Bolivar. The guy was a dictator that didn't actually care for the citizens or the freedom of them. He just wanted to make his dream come true, and that's ignoring all the horrible things he did. Extentation. Although he tried to better himself in the end, that dude was many times a complete douchebag. Edit. Whoa, didn't know this comment would blow up. I cut it out the catharsis part, as this was a translation mistake, not a native speaker. I always had the impression that he was a genuine guy fighting his demons, but that seemed to be somewhat fake, if it's true what all of you state. Charlie Chaplin wasn't nearly as goofy in real life. In fact, he was downright predatory, particularly with little girls. 2 out of his 4 wives were under 18 when he married them, while another one was just 18, and he was in his 50s at the time. The only one over 18 was 22, but he married her after she claimed to be 17. That's the opposite of a good look. Mother Teresa. She gained millions of followers and even more millions of dollars in her attempt to help and heal the sick and dying. Even when having the money, she would order her followers to reuse needles and other painful treatments. This isn't an exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, when people were in horrible pain and about to die, and pleading for help, she would say shit like, "You're feeling the pain of Jesus Christ. And then when she got sick and elderly, she didn't want the care of her followers. So she sent herself to an actual hospital, where she got legitimate treatment. This kid's dad in my neighborhood growing up was a major asshole. His son used to show up on his bike to whatever yard we'd be playing in, and he'd either steal something and ride away, so we'd all chase him, or he'd hurl insults at the lot of us, until we'd get on our bikes and chase the bastard. He was searching for the attention his father didn't give him. One time at a block party, this guy's son cut my older brother in line for a face painting artist. This led to a scuffle between two 10-year-olds, and before anyone could react, the boy's father ran up to the two of them and slapped my brother across the face, hard. He fell on the ground. The man's own son was shocked. He cried, I cried, my brother cried. He just grabbed his kid by the back of the neck and dragged him into the house. Fast forward 2 months, the man was diagnosed with colon cancer. The whole neighborhood knew, and he was regressing fast. One time he poked out during the winter and I pointed at him and screamed caveman. We all ran away. He was going though chemo and looked like a human skeleton. He died that spring. Everyone always said poor kid, poor Mr. Poor family, but us neighborhood kids knew that was just karma rolling full circle. That kid changed his entire attitude and we ended up going to tons of heavy metal shows in HS. Once in a while someone will bring it up and I just kinda sigh. The neighborhood gang was, and still is, just a big extended family. Ted Bundy. Now I understand that he definitely isn't treated like a saint nowadays, but so many people talk about how interesting and sophisticated he was, and there are people who basically worship him, even though he was an actual serial killer, and tbh I don't see how people can call him sophisticated and well spoken when I watch the interviews. Dude seemed like a total creep and that's exactly what he was. Someone probably already said this, but Joan Crawford. Mommy dearest anyone. This woman was an alcoholic who adopted trophy children, abused her adopted daughter, then schemed to steal said daughter's role on a TV show while she was in the hospital recovering from an ovarian cyst. Yet she is still overwhelmingly known for being an Oscar-winning classic actress in the golden age of Hollywood. Walt Disney. Seriously, fuck that guy. He was a great creative, but did everything in his power to fuck over his own employees. Not only would he fire them if they asked about a raise or union, but if they decided to go to other animation companies, the man would claim they were communist sympathizers and ruin their fucking lives. He did this to a growing animation company to the point they went under and nobody really remembers them. They had some really great stuff. He was sexist, racist, and oftentimes stole ideas from others. My uncle was a lying the living drug addict who stole from my grandma till the day he died, and apparently he was the nicest person who would give his shirt off his back. Probably stolen or is the reason you need a shirt in the first place, if needed. This man was such a dick. Sucks he died, but I no longer have to lock up my shit at family reunions. Teenagers and young adults who die by driving drunk or high on drugs. A guy I graduated high school with died in a single car accident because he tried to pass another car by going around that car's right side, which makes it worse, on the highway, while going over 100 miles per hour drunk and high on some type of pills. I said I'm glad he didn't kill a family and someone got very angry with me. Didn't Lewis Carroll write Alice in Wonderland based on a child of a family he was friends with in their holidays in land unknown? Pretty sure he used to also photograph said child and her younger sister nude when they were very young and was weirdly obsessed with her. Winston Churchill. Honestly, if he is alive at any other point in human history, he's an incompetent, authoritarian, racist, warmongering sack of fesses. However, he happens to have been born into the exact time and place where all his horrible characteristics could be molded into a situation where it is quite likely he was the best person possible for the job. I take nothing away from him. He is probably the person most responsible for the defeat of fascism and deserves all the credit in the world for it. But he was still an awful person. John Lennon. Never mind the wife beating and being a terrible father. He also sang and preached an awful lot about various movements from his expensive hotel room where maids waited on him hand and foot. So he was a hypocrite and an asshole. People romanticize Genghis Khan as some kind of progressive for his time freedom fighter. Yes, He liberated several places from the powers that were, but the dude literally lived by my way or the highway, except the highway was brutal execution. Women, children, elderly and men alike. Didn't matter who. But if you were a breeding age woman, the highway was you make another Genghis. Diego Maradona. The guy was an infamous cheat and a pedophile, but the whole of Argentina and a bunch of other people around the world are mourning his death, because occasionally he kicked a ball good without cheating. Any US president after their death, for at least a decade after. Seriously, even Nixon was considered a respected statesman until fairly recently. Reagan botched the AIDS response and destroyed the middle class, and even a word of criticism is considered far left. Margaret Thatcher. So many people hold her in high regard because she was a woman in a place of power. Hell, there's a movie about her. But if you know your history or you're Irish, you know she was a demon of a woman who deserves to rot in the depths of hell for what she did. Confederates raging debate on preserving, worse, erecting, more monuments/statues that highlights the bravery of these men, yet neglects the main reasons why the Civil War happened in the first place. Same beat by beat points on how the fuckery that KKK is still around, and the emerging of neo-Nazis in pretty much countries that currently have dictators running them, including but not all, Russia, China, as really the main ones on the spotlight. Dr. Seuss. Sure, he wrote really amazing children's books, but he was not a great man. He cheated on his wife while she was very ill and suffering from partial paralysis. It was largely the cause for her suicide. This is from her suicide note. Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral, going down down down, into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness. And loud in my ears from every side I hear, failure, failure, failure. I love you so much. I'm too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Sometimes think of the fun we had all through the years. J. Edgar Hoover. He wasn't the cool super spy communist hunter people made him out to be. Most of his claims had no basis, and he created mass hysteria for a problem that really didn't exist. You can be certain he didn't marry her for the conversation or her personality. Ideally you wouldn't marry a person for their money, but the same can be said about marriage based solely off looks. He knew what he was getting into, made the decision to give her his money in exchange for getting to spend time with someone who looked like she did. She deserved her cut. Most US presidents did some awful shit that we all collectively forgot, like Reagan's Iran-Contra affair or Andrew Jackson's wholesale genocidal attitude towards the natives. Both of them were hungry for power too. At least for Jackson it looks like people are finally realizing what a massive piece of shit he was. A bit political, but Ronald Reagan growing up, I always heard that he was the best Republican president ever, a model for the presidency. But he let thousands die per day from the AIDS epidemic because of his homophobia, and his trickle-down economic policies never worked and made the rich richer while the working class suffered. Bing Crosby. We listen to him sing White Christmas every year, but neglect to remember he used to beat his kids so bad he'd leave them bloody. Alexander the Great, a tragic character made of circumstances in those times by our standards, a mass murderer and a psychopath that only knew violence to solve his problems. My grandmother. Fuck you and rest in hell, old witch. She was a hateful woman who never wanted to have kids, but loved having sex. In her time there wasn't methods to prevent pregnancy, so she ended up having 5 kids and several abortions. The kids she had, she made sure to turn their lives a living hell. All of them left home as soon as they could. However, she was a Christian, church rat and involved with the church business. She was good at keeping the facade of old sweet lady in front of others. When she died, everyone praised her soul in the ceremony. Till this day. She died 5 years ago. Strangers still talk about how good she was. It pisses me on. Dale Earnhardt. Number 3. Dirtiest racer ever. Everybody hated that sob. Drives into the wall and all of a sudden he's a freaking angel. I think what it was everybody felt so much better all of a sudden and they channeled those good feelings into the only acceptable outpouring, which was to say, ooh, what a shame, what a loss instead of, well, less kind expressions. George Best, a very good footballer and an alcoholic wife beater and womanizer. But he was good at kicking a bull, so let's forget the fact that he punched women in the face, he assaulted a waitress, and broke her nose. His wife was accused of getting off on the abuse, and he is remembered as a hero because he could kick a bull well. He broke her arm and cut her hair off, but he's remembered as a hero because he could kick a bull better than other guys could kick a bull. Fuck that guy. John Paul II. He was a pope, so I don't think he was an awful person in his day-to-day life, but he's literally being treated as a saint now. I used to teach religious studies at Marquette and went to seminary to be a priest. I did a ton of terrible things theologically, basically expanding the rules of the Catholic Church 50-fold and undoing much of the progress done by Vatican II. He made Catholicism less about social justice and more about rules and being pure. Meanwhile, he implements the largest systematic cover-up of pedophilia in modern history. Because of his actions, millions around the world were traumatized and never able to recover. He hurt the world, humanity and the church in immeasurable ways that will be felt worldwide for generations. Michael Jackson, decent singer, but rapist and pedo. One of the kids he used to touch said I used to like shiny necklaces and stuff like that, so in order to entice me, Michael would give me little gold trinkets. Another said I remember having large amounts of blood in my pants at one of my sessions with him. Even if you don't believe the rape and pedophilia allegations, he had sleepovers with 9-year-olds, which is creepy by any moral standards. Columbus. When I was a kid in the US, I always thought he was a saint during his life, since that was what I was taught in school. It was only until I was older that I learned and understood what really happened. Probably doing to get downvoted to hell, but IDC, it needs to be said, XXXTentation, he had been charged with aggravated battery on a pregnant woman, domestic battery, and first-degree witness tampering. Not to mention the abundance of accusations against him. The guy was a piece of shit. Somebody probably mentioned this already, but Ernesto Che Guevara. He's revered as a Robin Hood type by coffee shop revolutionaries and first semester college freshmen, but his exploits were largely fabricated. Accounts from his friends and peers told the story of bloodthirsty rapists who understood the power of symbolism. He used that glorified Robin Hood image to make good with the people and plunder riches for himself. I'll say it, Kobe Bryant. I feel bad for his family and his daughter, and I'd never wish the way he died on anyone, but I never got past the rape stuff and people seem to just forget it happened. Here are a couple that I would like to have seen, but did Winston Churchill was a racist maniac with more similarities to Hitler than people like to admit. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner who raped Sally Hemings when she was 14. Penn and Teller did a episode of their show Bullshit, exposing 3 more. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and the Dalai Lama, though he is still alive, and I have seen Gandhi in here, and Abraham Lincoln was responsible for some of atrocities towards Native Americans. Rockefeller, partly because he is dead and partly because he plowed a lot of his ill-gotten gains into public projects that people like, so they forget about what he was like in life. While their dad has finally gotten the hate he deserves, Bobby and Jack Kennedy still get treated well, even though they were pretty big pieces of garbage in their time, whether it was political or personal actions. Columbus. He was responsible for the raping and killing of so many Native Americans. Yet people still say he found the Americas. That's like if I came to your house and killed you, and then said it was mine all along. My brother. He was an abusive, homophobic, racist, wife-beating, cheating scumbag. He'd been to jail twice and neglected the 2 kids he had with his wife and mistress. He was a piece of shit who died of a drug overdose, and after he died everyone in my family began worshipping him. Oh, he was such a sweet soul, may he rest in peace. He was such a nice guy, he didn't deserve this. He was a cunt. But everyone likes to forget. Jimmy Valvano, the NC State basketball coach. Dude was a total dick to his players and wife, but got cancer and died, and now he's a saint. My grandmother's husband. People are carrying on about how wonderful and caring of a man he was and how their lives will be forever changed now that he's gone. The man walked out on 3 different families. Yes, you read that right. 3 different families. Found out through the grapevine that he was arrested for having his dick out in a public park. Beat up his disabled stepdaughter. Racist as hell. I understand that in most cases we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, which I agree with to a degree. But if someone had very little to no redeemable qualities, maybe they should be remembered in disgrace, not honor. George H.W. Bush. Nicaraguans were being slaughtered by Contras because he continued to secretly fund them. He should have been in prison till his dying breath. Instead he was immortalized as America's cocky old grandpa who would regularly grope women in his wheelchair, while Barbara watched and dismissed it as just an old man being an old man. Ronald Reagan. He was revered by Republicans when he was alive, but after he died you have even Democrats like Obama holding up as some kind of positive example. Christopher Columbus. So much of what he did was incredibly fucked even for the time, yet he's credited for finding America, which he didn't even do. He landed somewhere in Mexico and thought he was in India. Not only that, but the Americas had been discovered by a few different people, not counting the ones that already lived there, way before Columbus was even born. Diego Armando Maradona. Probably the best football/soccer player to ever exist, but he also did stuff like supporting the Cuban and Venezuelan regime, beating his wife, having sex with underage girls, had a super cocaine addiction, and believed he was God himself. But since he died, everybody in my country, Argentina, treats him like a goddamn national hero. Winston Churchill. Real mean piece of shit, and treated his own people like shit. Cruel to the Indians, and if you thought that he only suffered from racial prejudice, look up who the black and tans were to learn about all the shitty things he did to the Irish as well. But I can applaud and appreciate his actions. In fighting fascism he was an interesting character and the best, well, as good as they were going to get leader for the UK during WWII. Nobody is pure good or pure evil, and while having to choose between the lesser of 2 evils, choosing the lesser evil is extremely important. And that's what he was, the lesser evil. Probably why he's so respected. I can hate the evil things about him and love the good things about him. People are fucked, man. Sid Vicious. He was piece of shit junkie who abused and murdered his girlfriend. Sid and Nancy's relationship was the most toxic codependent thing on the planet, yet people still romanticize them. Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, founders of the Mormon Church. Smith was a con man, pedophile, and slimebag. Young was a virulent racist, told his followers to not drink while he drank heavily, ordered the murder of peaceful settlers, and then blamed it on Native American Englisher. George Washington's false teeth were slaves' teeth that were pulled from the mouth of, presumably, living slaves and elephant ivory. He first became a slave owner at age 11 and owned 317 slaves at the height of his estate. At the end of his life, he ordered his slaves to be emancipated in his will, but I'm of the opinion that there should not be a single statue of someone who owned another human being, no matter their role in the world. Tell me if I'm wrong, and I'm willing to gladly eat criticism. Beliefs should be motile, or they are dogma with fancy hats on.